UN Security Council needs
Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World, and here are the headlines. The Trump administration has announced that it will begin negotiations with China over its dominance in shipbuilding and ocean logistics, while pausing US port fees on China-linked vessels for 1 year. The move, formalized by the US Trade Representative's office, also invites public comments in early November. Chinese Vice Premier Deng Xueqiang has urged world leaders to remove trade barriers and promote the free flow of green products to combat climate change. His remarks come as China, a major producer of solar panels, batteries and EVs, faces high US tariffs on its clean energy imports. The White House has reportedly blocked NVIDIA from selling its newly developed scaled-down B30A AI chips to China. The chip, capable of training large language models in clustered systems, had already been sampled by several Chinese firms before this particular decision. US President Donald Trump has stated that discussions with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are progressing positively as trade negotiations continue. He's also announced plans to visit India soon to further strengthen bilateral ties. According to Afghan officials, at least 5 Afghan civilians have been killed and 6 injured in cross-border firing at the Chaman-Spin-Boltak border. While Pakistan has reported no casualties, both nations exchanged blame, with Kabul accusing Pakistan of opening fire and Islamabad insisting that shots were first fired from the Afghan side. The death toll from Typhoon Kalmegi in the Philippines has risen to 188, with most fatalities reported in Cebu. Authorities have stated that 135 people remain missing and 96 injured, though the figures are still being verified. US President Donald Trump has announced that an international stabilization force for Gaza would be deployed very soon as part of his peace plan. The US drafted a UN Security Council resolution authorizing a 2-year mandate for transitional governance in Gaza and the ISF, which would use all necessary measures to fulfill its mission. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth has confirmed that US forces struck another alleged drug trafficking boat in the Caribbean, killing 3, raising the total death toll from the campaign to at least 70. The strike, carried out in international waters, targeted a vessel linked to a purported designated terrorist organization, with aerial footage now released. Well, viewers, those are the headlines, and we're tracking some breaking updates coming in. According to the Japanese government, North Korea has fired a ballistic missile towards the sea off of its east coast. Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi has stated that they've not confirmed any damage related to this particular missile, while the Japanese Coast Guard has reported that the missile has allegedly fallen. A similar incident occurred on 22nd October when North Korea fired missiles towards the Sea of Japan with no indication that they fell in Japanese waters. Well, viewers, we're tracking further updates. Amid fears of a growing trade war between the world's 2 largest economies, the Trump administration has now stated that it will pursue negotiations with China over its dominance of shipbuilding and ocean logistics, as it has formalized plans for a 1-year pause on US port fees on China-linked vessels as part of a broader deal to reduce trade tensions. The United States Trade Representative's office has stated in a Federal Register notice that it would pause for a year starting November 10th all punitive actions against China resulting from its Section 301 unfair trade practices investigation. The 12-month reprieve on an estimated $3.2 billion annually in US fees for large Chinese-built vessels sailing to US ports is amongst the agreements reached in South Korea in the meeting that took place between US President Donald Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. The 100% tariffs on ship-to-shore cranes and container intermodal chassis for trucks have also been paused by the United States of America. Joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a strategist focusing on China. and the Chinese economy as well as its policies. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting development. It does seem that the meeting that took place between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping has resulted in the tensions that have been simmering for a while to at least halt on this particular front as far as the port fees are concerned. How do you think this will impact the global shipping costs at least, if not the supply chains at large?
Well, port these huge port fees and shipping charges on vessels made in China, regardless of the flags, the shipping flag each individual vessel flies, provided the vessel visits United States port, is of course hurting the whole grouping industry, because China ships they carry cargoes around the world. As far as these shipping fees are concerned, they were imposed not just to earn tariff fees, but to fracture China's dominant shipping industry. Now, China has been building the vast majority of the world's ships. Of 1,000 ships built in China, the United States builds about 4. And of course, this would diminish the American influence in the world shipping industry, but also it would hurt the Americans' military, the naval capabilities, because shipbuilding capabilities also can translate into naval vessels. So that's why the shipping fees were imposed in the first place, targeting all Chinese-built ships, regardless of the flag they fly. However, because of China's global reach, this is affecting supply chains and shipping routes around the world, including those in the United States. And of course, as part of the trade deal reached in South Korea, the Trump administration has scaled down the red trade. Not to mention the reality that just by imposing shipping fees, it's not going to change the shipping capabilities in the United States, because it's not just forcing the shipbuilding back to the United States. The question of what kind of shipbuilding facilities, the infrastructure, the manpower, the skill, the whole ecosystem does not exist in the United States anymore. So that's why there is a pause in the imposition of the shipping fees as part of the overall trade deal with Beijing.
Indeed, and speaking of the shipbuilding industry in the United States at large, this is something that Trump has been looking at revitalizing, at augmenting once again. As you've mentioned, China is the dominant country in the shipping industry, the shipbuilding industry. How do you then think this particular decision by the Trump administration will sort of impact his ambitions and American shipbuilders as well?
Because it seems that the President Trump's apparently very bold decisions, they do not necessarily square with reality. The same applies to the shipbuilding charges in the hope of building shipbuilding back to the United States. In the same way that it imposes tariffs on Chinese products in the hope that all the manufacturing or most of the manufacturing process will automatically go back to the United States, without realizing that, of course, the whole supply and value chain in the United States, as far as most of the products in the world, have already been outsourced decades ago. And there simply does not exist the supporting infrastructure, the manufacturing processes, the huge canopy of products. As far as shipping is concerned, the infrastructure, the shipyards, the technology, the manpower, they do not exist. It's not as if just by waving a tariff magic wand, everything will go back to the United States. And I think the Trump administration and his advisors are wising up to it, are wising up to the reality.
Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some further updates. We're now learning that China's Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping has called for an end to trade barriers that are holding back the global energy transition. He's urged true multilateralism from fellow leaders at the COP30 Global Climate Summit in Belém in Brazil, which will commence on Monday. Deng has urged developed countries to fulfill their obligations to take the lead in emission reduction earnestly, honor their funding commitments while providing more support to developing countries as well. This comes after Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier stated that China is aiming to reduce and open economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035 compared with its peak. Now, as part of China's nationally determined contribution targets by 2035, the country's non-fossil energy consumption will account for more than 30% of total energy consumption. Listen in to what the Vice Premier had to say.
我们要加强绿色技术和产业国际协同，破除贸易壁垒，确保优质绿色产品自由流通，更好地满足全球可持续发展需要。
Stay with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. China has, of course, been taking quite a leap as far as augmenting renewable energy, sustainable energy is concerned. Its targets for 2035 are quite ambitious as well. We do know that the COP30 is on the anvil. It will commence very, very shortly. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, what are your expectations from the COP30 at large? And secondly, we do know China is also a major producer of solar panels, batteries, EVs, and it's been facing pressure from US tariffs on all of these. So in light of that, what sort of messaging, signaling is China sending out to the rest of the world?
Well, China is by far the largest supplier of solar panels and wind turbines and other green products, including batteries for electric vehicles and the production of the electric vehicles themselves, accounting for the lion's share, sometimes in excess of 80% or 90%. And China's pivot towards green energy is driven not only by the need for blue skies and green waters to make the country a beautiful China, as promised by President Xi's centenary goals, but also because of national security, because green energy is homegrown. It doesn't depend on imports. And China is the world's largest importing country, and the import of energy exposes China's vulnerability to sanctions or interdiction in the transit of energy, for example, through the South China Sea, through the choke points in Malacca Strait, and so on. So I think that this has been a long developed strategy of China to pivot towards green energy. And of course, China has succeeded in reaching the targets because of its dominance in so many different fields. It's on track to achieve a carbon peak by 2030 and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. And this pivot, of course, has the support of many developing countries who are suffering from the effects of climate change in rising sea levels, in unstable weather, destroying agricultural and other livelihood and ecology. But as far as the United States is concerned, don't forget that President Trump had withdrawn from the Paris Agreement twice, Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. And he's still doubling down on fossil fuels because the fossil fuels are the energy, oil, they are the main backers of the Republican Party. Now, as far as the other advanced countries are concerned, they are at a dilemma. On the one hand, they support the momentum towards climate change because climate change has a very popular support in countries in Europe, and other advanced countries. But on the other hand, the economy is suffering a lot of headwinds because of the tariffs, because they slow down the economy. And then, of course, the energy supply has been tremendously affected. So I think that they are also recalibrating, but they're still embracing the momentum towards a response to the climate change. But then the momentum has been is checkered, to say the least. So I think that there is a mixture of different trajectory towards the climate goals. But overall, the world still embraces
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking further updates. We're now learning that a group of 8 Republican U.S. senators have applauded President Trump's decision to continue denying China access to NVIDIA's most advanced artificial intelligence chips. Now, the senators have sent a letter of appreciation to the U.S. president. This comes a day after NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang stated that China was likely to beat the United States in the global AI race. The senators from Nebraska, Arkansas, Indiana, Texas and North Dakota were among the signatories of the letter. NVIDIA CEO had earlier stated that the key to the US's success is the use of American chips by software developers in China. And ahead of the meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping last week, there were concerns among certain sections of American politicians who feared that Trump might relax the export controls of advanced Blackwell chips to China. However, Trump did not lift the export control restrictions on NVIDIA chips. The senators wrote that they applaud the president's decision to withhold the exports and have also stated that this decision is a significant step in ensuring that the U.S. wins the AI race. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Now, these chips are basically used, as we all know, to train large language models. There is an AI race taking place between the United States and China. But what we've seen in recent times is very interesting because US companies, whether it is ChatGPT or for that matter, Microsoft or Apple, they're spending millions and millions in order to refine their models. On the other hand, we've recently seen the emergence of DeepSeek. Its training cost was reported to be significantly lower, and it reportedly claims, the company claims that it trains its V3 model for about $6 million US. That's of course far less than the $100 million that cost that was pegged for OpenAI's GPT-4 back in 2023. It also, in fact, DeepSeek also uses approximately 1/10 of the computing power consumed by Meta's comparable model, the Llama 3.1. So keeping all of this in light, do you think America's decision could backfire in the near future and could push China to develop its own chips?
Well, there is a mixture of very important, misunderstood aspects of this technology race, particularly on AI, artificial intelligence. First of all, the DeepSeek phenomenon exposes the fallacy of the West putting big money on building big data centers. These data centers are the huge infrastructure huge energy consumption multiple times and many times over that consumes a vast quantity of energy at any given time. So that the United States and some of its business partners across the world are putting big money on building AI centers across the globe. And it's not as if you can build AI centers anywhere. It must be located in areas with easy access to electricity supply. So a lot of companies, big companies, are sinking big money. Whereas this DeepSeek breakthrough exposes this fallacy that you can produce even superior performance with much less energy. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, of course, even the DeepSeek, the AI model using much less energy still requires a relatively cheap energy. You look at the cost China's energy costs, on average, even to businesses, to households, is a fraction of the world, because China's huge production of renewable energy using solar, the advanced stage of solar power, wind power, and this has been, and also China's electricity supply using its a cross-country network from the eastern side of China to the western side of China, using high-tension cables, have been developed very and also because of the vast quantity produced on green energy, this has driven down the energy costs of China. So these two factors translate into China's dominance in green energy.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, sharing your analysis with all of us. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to news coming in. Now, according to Afghan officials, at least 5 civilians, 4 women and 1 man were killed and 6 others wounded in cross-border firing at the Chaman-Spin-Boldak border on the 7th of November. Pakistan reported no casualties. Both countries have traded blame for the violence. Afghanistan's Taliban government has accused Pakistani forces of once again opening fire on this particular border, while Pakistan's Information Ministry has rejected these claims, stating that firing was initiated from the Afghan side and that its forces responded in a measured and responsible manner. This incident occurred as delegations from both nations were in Istanbul in Turkey, attempting to finalize a ceasefire deal after weeks of deadly clashes. Remember, talks hit an impasse earlier, with each side accusing the other of blocking progress. Islamabad continues to accuse Kabul of sheltering the TTP leadership, while Taliban insists on respect for Afghanistan's sovereignty. Turkey is mediating the talks. It is stated that both sides had agreed to create a monitoring mechanism, but this new fresh border violence, of course, threatens to derail the fragile process. Joining us on the broadcast is Major General Rajan Kochar, Senior Strategic and Defense Expert from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interesting development coming in. We've been tracking what's been taking place between Pakistan and Afghanistan for quite a while. It was Pakistan that struck Afghanistan first, which led to the hostilities escalating last month itself. There was a brief relief on the 19th of October after a ceasefire was reached in Doha in Qatar, but talks were derailed in Istanbul last month, late last month, around 28th, when reportedly the Pakistani side received a last-minute phone call from Islamabad when they were about to finalize the deal. But in the meantime, they agreed to an interim ceasefire and talks have once again resumed in Istanbul. But despite that, we're seeing the tensions once again escalating on the border. In your assessment, where will this head to next, and what's really driving this conflict? Is it, as the Pakistanis claim, the TTP and its attacks, or is there a larger game that is currently at play?
Thank you. This development is actually mostly on the expected lines. As I see things shaping up in relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan, actually what has happened is that there is a lack of mutual trust and confidence in each other. These talks may keep on going, but till such time you establish a monitoring mechanism, a kind of a cell comprising of neutral countries, or it can be the UN also. Unless you have this kind of a mechanism in place where Qatar and Turkey can also play a role, I don't think these
there seems to be a network issue at your end, Major General Kochar. I request you to stay on with us as our crew corrects that. But in the meantime, of course, adding to what Major General Kochar has been saying, there were interim attempts by Turkey and Qatar to mediate a ceasefire. Talks are still underway in Istanbul, but interestingly, last time around on the 28th of October, both sides were at the brink of an agreement. Kabul had sought guarantees from Pakistan that Pakistan would not violate Afghan airspace. It would prevent US drones from operating through its territory and would ensure that ISIS-linked groups were not allowed to use Pakistani soil to strike Afghanistan. But of course, there were some points that were not agreed upon by the Pakistanis. That, of course, is not known at this point, but we'll try to get that network issue sorted so that we can get Major General Scorcher's opinion. I request the PCR crew to look into this in the meantime. But to provide a little context to our viewers, all right, moving on, since it seems that our crew is unable to tackle this, of course, I have to spell it out over here. US President Donald Trump has stated that his talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are going well, calling him a great man and a great friend, while hinting that he may visit India next year. This comes as both countries continue negotiating trade following the US's decision to impose a 50% tariff, including 25% additional duties on India due to its ongoing purchase of Russian oil. Meanwhile, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has defended the tariff, stating that Trump has asked India to halt Russian oil imports. Lutnick has emphasized that these tariffs are a key tool in pressuring Russia over its war against Ukraine, adding that without such powers, the president can't ensure global or US security. Moving on to more news coming in, we're now learning that the death toll from Typhoon Kalmegi in the Philippines has risen to 188, with 135 people still missing. The storm has regained strength as it moved towards Vietnam now, where more than 350,000 people have been evacuated due to flooding and damaging winds. Authorities have warned of continuing heavy rainfall of up to 200 millimeters in central provinces from Thanh Hoa to Quang Tri. Meanwhile, a new storm is developing east of Mindanao, which could strengthen into a typhoon, raising concerns for the upcoming week. Kalmegi is the 20th storm to hit the Philippines this year and comes just after a deadly earthquake had taken place in Cebu. Shifting focus to West Asia for a moment, where the Israeli military has released a collection of declassified IDF intelligence documents from Gaza, where they claim exposes the full extent of Hamas's operations and connections. The files allege that Hamas fighters have hoarded humanitarian aid, worsening civilian suffering, and have infiltrated international organizations, including the UNRWA, where some officials and educators were allegedly complicit in terror activities. The documents also suggest collaboration between Hamas and certain journalists from Al Jazeera in supporting terrorist actions. The IDF claims that the materials provide a detailed view of the networks and strategies Hamas uses to sustain its campaign of violence and deception. The documents are yet to be independently verified. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on the China Report. We will continue to track all of these updates very, very closely.